President Raghupati, Secretary Saravanan, PDG Ramakrishna Raja, so happy to see you after quite some time. My own Secretary Sridharan, fellow Rotarians and Anne, Sharada and any other friends who are here. Well, it's a really pleasant time for me, which I had many years ago in the Rotary Club of Madras South, and I'm hoping that this evening won't go south for me at least. So, for a couple of you who are in the audience, notably, I think Mr. Rajan, Mr. Madhu, Sriram and Sharada, some of the items that I'm going to talk about are going over familiar territory because this is what I also spoke about a few days ago at the Madras Week on August 22nd. So, bear with me for some repetition. I didn't expect that the same audience would be there. It's like the auto driver of Madras, never thinks he'll get the same savari again. So he can behave any which way he wants. If somebody can do a right click, we can proceed with the. You have to do a right click. I put a white screen. Yeah, in screen, just go to screen. Yeah. Unblock. Yeah. Somebody should help me because I can't. Unfortunately, again it's gone. 1 second. I think I have to again adjust the display. Just one step by one step. Okay, now Mr. Madhu, when he saw this presentation, Rotarian Madhu, when he saw it at that place, he thought it was a heavily researched presentation. Well, it was, but we fellows, I'm in the market research business initially. And the idea in market research was you copy from one source, it is plagiarism, you copy from 10, it's research. So, so if you think that this is research, then you know what kind of research it is. So, the first, you'll have to go click by click. So, this is the same thing guys, so don't, I didn't have time to change the joke, so please laugh again. So, basically my idea, I used this there, I said, I like to use a lot of unnecessary visuals and all that. So the agenda today I think is the following for me. One click, which is press again. First is hopefully you will be educated and I'm looking like that wise bird out there. Secondly is like the little baby, you have some enjoyment, press again. Yeah. And the third is that you have some idea about what happened or is happening with respect to employment and entrepreneurship, I would add, in Chennai. And all this, which is the last, is hopefully we'll end up smiling like this at the end of it, which is like in Tamil we say, E. So this is my agenda for today. Hopefully you'll have a good time. Any questions, anything, you can always stop me in the middle. Now what I'm quickly going to do, I am now filled with a great amount of trepidation because the resident historian of Madras is there. Is there in Chennai. But I thought when I looked at the timeline, it struck me that there were a couple of inflection points actually. And for me, it struck me also that there are a lot of things which look like it's happening anew, but actually it's not. It's actually, we are just repeating a lot of the things of the past. So it looks like as if you are, if you believe in reincarnation, it's like as if the same guy is having the same kind of life, but only thing that he's labeling it differently. So that's the reason for putting some of the timeline, okay? The second thing is to give you some idea of the broad trends in employment at a very high level, which is what the CMDA, earlier avatar was MMDA, has to say. And then my version of employment trends, okay, what I believe. I then also have added, compared to what we did the last time, I've also added some my own pop sociology, psychology takes on the different generations. And some overall trends that I see in a couple of industries. I've taken them just for illustration. and then we have Q&A, and hopefully we'll adjourn after that. Okay, so quick timeline. Now, broadly, when I looked at a couple of sources I found, you can look at Chennai history very quickly, according to me, in 3 periods. One is up to the 17th century, which is a whole lot of things happened, but we don't have too much of data, or we don't care too much about it. The other is the 17th, 18th and 19th century, which is 3 period, the second period. And the third is the 20th century, which I thought would be actually action-packed, but really is not as action-packed as the 17th to 19th century, in my view. I know, so Sriram may differ. Okay, go ahead. So, when I looked at it, the first big event that they put out there is way back when Mr. Thomas came here, and he was subsequently interred after the Portuguese came and established the Santom Church and all that. Broadly, you'll see 3rd century, Pallavas, around the 9th century, the Cholas, around the 13th century, the Pandyas rose, around the 14th century, the Vijayanagar kingdom came, and then after that, the Europeans started coming in and playing havoc with our lives. So, broadly up to the 16th century, you can see a whole host of things happened. Different guys from different places. Okay, so this was phase 1. In my view, when I looked at it, you had 17th century was the inflection point. You know, it was like as if a whole bunch of fellows from across the seas decided that there's a whole lot of things to be done out here, and somewhere they had a fancy for Chennai. Not that a lot of people today have a fancy for it, which I'll come to a little later. But the Dutch came, the English came, the French came, the Mughals came, even a gentleman called Hyder Ali also came, which I have not mentioned out here. But you can see a whole lot of things happened. Couple of key periods was 1626, 1639, which is what we today celebrate as Madras Day, 22nd August. And the population in the mid 17th century was roughly about 19,000, which will probably fill some small area now in and around Savera, I guess. But what was very interesting to me, which I discovered courtesy a talk that Sriram gave at our club, was that Chennai Corporation is the second corporation in the world after the London Corporation. So that's why I put that very major milestone. And even today it has apparently pretty good accounting compared to many other corporations in India. The reason for giving all this is to give you some sense that a lot of things were happening, the whole lot of changes that were happening out there. Now comes the next interesting stage for me, which is what I believe that Madras gets going. A whole lot of different things happened. The newspaper came, a post office came, Mr. Parry, of the eponymous company, he came, the first engineering college kind of started. And for some people, including one person in this audience, who was a member of that August club, the Madras Club was founded. Railway line, education, then a big famine, again the Hindu paper which still sleeps in its usual place, the first telephone, and then thereafter very quickly even the first bank. What I'm trying to say here is a whole bunch of new professions suddenly started sprouting in a fairly short period of time. So in that sense, it's a time of great change. And a lot of new skills had to be developed from what was a very different kind of a society till then. So we are trying to think that we are going through throes of great change. But in reality, if you look at it, there was significant change in barely 2 centuries. That's the point I'm trying to make out here. The different professions, different skills, different even cultures, all of which collided. I don't think we have the Dutch, the Mughals, the English, the French, all consorting at the same time right now. But imagine that period, even though the numbers may not have been too many, but there are a whole lot of influences. So I'm just trying to give you a sense that I don't think we can really say we have too many challenges today, because the guys then I think had much more challenges, and nature also. Man-made famines plus natural famines, both happened. Okay, and then the 20th century, which I found a tad boring in the sense, In 1901, we had a 5,40,000 population, and we got our first street lights barely 100 years ago. Then we got our first transportation about 88 years back, and then in 56, Madras city became the capital first, I think, initially of the Madras state, and subsequently of the unified Tamil Nadu state, when many more territories were annexed. I put Vallur Kottam because I stay near there. And that seems to be, when I ask many people, have you ever been to Vallur Kottam? They say soon, sometime, but they don't know when. It's all only outsiders who seem to go to Vallur Kottam and some kind of lovers or whatever, find it a cozy place when other functions and exhibitions are not happening. And it was 17 years back when it was renamed Chennai. So I didn't find too many interesting things happening. All the things that are listed as some MMDA become CMDA and all those kinds of boring stuff. Nothing very earth-shaking. But if I remember right, the last reservoir in Chennai was built in 1932, I think. When 1932 or 40, when Mayor Satyamurthy was the man. Since then, it's so strange. The population has grown manifold, but the number of reservoirs hasn't. It tells you something about what we have not done than what we have done. That's the basic point I wanted to say. Okay, now we move on to the next phase, which is, if you look at the population, it's again jumped. If you notice, in the last 40 odd years, we have more than doubled. This is the official count in 2001. The 2011 census reveals that we are closer perhaps to about 85 plus to 90 maybe, depending on what you define today the Chennai metropolitan area. CMA. If you look at the square kilometers, it's also jumped. But the density, if you notice, within Chennai city and outside is huge. In Chennai city, it's 249 per hectare. Still maybe not as close as say Kerala is as a state. But it's quite dense now. And if you notice, the infrastructure that we have is really not kept up with what was there even 70 years or 50 years, 60 years ago. Okay, let's move on. So the broad trends, now this is where I'm taking from a MMDA report. If you look at it, 18th, 19th century, you had essentially a lot of mercantile, trade, commerce, and some newer professions like I mentioned, which is why I put the harbour as the basic, basic symbol of those kinds of activities. And then in the early 20th century, I think especially till maybe the independence time, it was basically everybody wanted to be in some kind of service or administration or simply struggle in some fashion. So that's why I put that service. Manufacturing started only post-independence in a significant way, and I think the earliest, the number 1 Mount Road was, I think, the Simpson factory, which is today, I think, 861 Mount Road, correct? Okay, so that's what the oldest on Mount Road. The oldest manufacturing, I think, is not that, it's somewhere else, which is a Tafe one.
No, you mean the Simpson or
the manufacturing Simpson again, no?
Industry is Paris leather unit.
Paris leather.
In Lake Castle in Salford.
Okay. Now, wait, come back. Now, in the last 20 odd years, in the 90s actually, you will find from the 80s and the 90s, the whole sea change from the primary set of activities, the people who are engaged in low-level labor, even agriculture and all that, sudden and huge change towards the secondary and tertiary. Today, tertiary, as the corporation and the CMDA define it, accounts for 90-91% of total employment and throughput or output in Chennai. It's really very high. And primary services actually account for next to nothing. It actually accounts for 1.2% or 1.3%. So it's a really negligible sum. So there's been a dramatic transformation in that sense. It's a huge transformation that you see. And particularly in the 90s, you will see the 2-3 types of services: financial services, IT, the BPO services, and increasingly newer services, digital, media, entertainment, and education and healthcare are some of the businesses that have suddenly seen a big flowering. And you'll see more of it when I talk a little later. Now, this is the official trend, but I found this is a little boring as far as I'm concerned. So I looked at it very differently. I look at it in 3 stages. Next one, please. Okay, the first stage, in my view, is this. This is the picture from the 1876-78 famine. It came in the Hindu exactly on August 22nd. And I would say the first phase for a lot of people till the 60s or so was simply survival. There was no other go. I mean, I think starvation, people say South Asians have what is called the starvation gene, which is why today many of us got diabetes, sugar, diabetes, heart attacks, etc., hypertension. It's because our arteries are too thin, unlike the Americans of pretty fat ones. Because we have been starving till almost the 70s. So we can't today take rich food in the quantity that we're taking, sweets every second day, maybe every meal now for some people. We just can't take it, but this was the order of the day at that time. So anything that you got which gave you some employment, people took it because I think there was no other choice. It's the Tina factor. Next phase. which I would characterize, which Mr. MGR in his very famous Nadodi Mannan sang and warbled the song. The Tungade Tambi Tungade, Somberi and prepared Vangade. So don't be a lazy bum was the broad message that he gave over there. So everybody and his uncle and nephew went to become something like this, which is a good stenotypist, secretary, went to Bombay typically or Calcutta, some of them boxwalas, trying to make a living. Many people had no choice, even if they harbored dreams of being writers or playwrights or musicians or whatever. Their mothers and fathers said, boss, you have no other choice, you got to help us make our family, not survival, it will be on survival, but unless there was no income. So even people who are in primary services, for example, the kid became 10, 12, he was asked to start working because you needed more money to come in rather than a fellow to be studying.
This is taking across the board of all sectors of society, or your...
I'm generalizing, of course, broadly, but you just look at it. Even fellows like us who might have been born in the 60s or early 70s, maybe our idea of a treat used to be a Rita ice cream. Kuchi ice, maybe a milk ice, once in a week maybe. Your idea of a treat at that time, my father was in the government service, which was among the better paying or whatever you call it. But even then, your idea of a treat, going to a Jafar was like one miraculous thing, maybe, you could...
We were young, dosa in the Udupi restaurant was a treat.
Jaffar's is certainly reminiscence.
Correct. So, you can remember the number of times you might have gone to such places. Even a person who's little better off. So, if you look at it, maybe it covered about 90+% maybe of the population in some fashion or the other. Because even in the 70s when the Pakistan war came, Indo-Pak thing, you would know that there are a lot of shortages of food and many other things. So many of us might have seen it firsthand in some fashion. And the ultimate dream for that many people at that time was to somehow get a Bajaj Vespa scooter, 10-year waiting list, whatever. Even marriages used to be fixed, depending on whether groom had, Bajaj scooter or groom got a Bajaj scooter. So this was the situation, I would say, almost till maybe the early 90s or something. Late 80s, early 90s almost, it was kind of like that. The first glimmerings of hope and change came in 91, when you had the reform. Little bit came when Rajiv Gandhi was there. But that hope soon faded because Rajiv Gandhi soon went back to the old guard. And then after that he, what happened to him. But then there came the third choice, the third phase, which is somewhere around, my view, about 2-3 years after the 90s, barely 20 years, not even 20 years in my view, which is, I think, the phenomenon of choice for the first time. I think the question of the thing of opportunities, my batch, for example, in IIM experienced some of it. We were among the privileged in the country where one student had 4 to 5 job offers. But how many of us were there? Maybe some 2 to 5,000 in the country at best, which is nothing. It include the IITs, the IIMs, a few other institutions, maybe 5 to 7,000, 10,000 under, which is nothing. So if you really look at it, real choice didn't happen even then. So if you look at it, the first thing that happened, I would say, is the phenomenon of choices. People could at least say, I don't want to do this course, I want to do another course. And the father and mother will look askance because they don't know what that course is. Even today there are so many courses whose names people haven't heard of. Like recently I think we saw Hemalata outside, but my friend's daughter did something called dramaturgy in the UK. For the first, I never knew what it was, but then after that she got a job in BBC in doing television production and all that. It's a completely whole new ball game now, which is what I put that picture deliberately to say. If people said, now I can march to the beat of my own drummer, I don't have to follow your tune, and you don't have to be Pied Piper, because I can start making some choices, I can get some loan, I can do some things. So another big change that you also started seeing was the growing presence of women. In the workforce, I think the first huge change came somewhere around that time and led. Earlier, the only women you saw in offices were in the clerical typist cadre. I remember in '82 when my colleague from IIM, my batchmate came to Sundaram Fasteners to do her summer placement. And only when she reached Sundaram Fasteners did they realize one very funny thing, that there was no lady toilet for the lady managers. And it cannot be that this lady manager goes to the general toilet for ladies. So she had used Suresh Krishna's toilet. Because they couldn't suddenly manufacture a toilet at that time. But these started becoming the order of the day. And you started hearing things like, I am who I am, I want to do what I want to do, it's my life. And songs like that became the anthem. It's my life, Aerosmith or whoever it is, I forget. Okay. Now this is what I think happened. Now in the same breath, a few things happened in my view, which is a change. It's like a change in the roles, which people didn't understand. If you look at the survival role, this is again all my pop sociology, psychology, okay? Nothing very hugely, not a Wendy Doninger of Hinduism and Sanskrit and all that business. So if you look at the survival phase, I think the roles were very simply, on the one side there was a lord and master, and on the other side there was a serf and slave, that kind of a relationship. And typically the lord and master had to be carried around by a bunch of slaves. And you could literally lord it over them, use might. And I think the paradigm there was might. You jolly well listen or your life. As simple as that. In the necessity phase, I believe it was the owner-worker, paradigm, which if you look at the movies also, whether in Hindi or in Tamil or in many languages, you had a whole bunch of movies which said Modalali means bad and the worker means good. The fellow from the village, good. The fellow from the city, bad. Very black and white kind of broad characterizations, all that. But the whole paradigm again in my view was money. I discovered this very old picture of a stamp, of a fellow slaving away at a little machine. It reminded me a little bit about modern times and Charlie Chaplin. And if you see that, it's a very fascinating thing about how Charlie Chaplin completely gets unhinged and goes around trying to literally screw everybody with that spanner or whatever. Very fascinating movie that you can see. The third phase, I think the whole thing had changed, and I think we're still grappling with it in my view. A lot of us still haven't got it. I think the situation has become one of a colleague or peer, and the paradigm now is of the mind. But I think a lot of us haven't got it. I can still see this battle happening because a lot of us are stuck in phase 2. Maybe few of us are still stuck in phase 1. But we haven't realized that 60% today of India is below the age of 30. 50% is below the age of 24. That's 600 million below the age of 24. We are on the wrong side, guys. We haven't realized that the way the younger crowd is coming is from a very different perspective. In my organization, the average age was 23. Initially it was a little challenging because we had a bunch, 43% were women. Many were first generation engineers, postgraduates in science, medical doctors, business editors, what have you. Initially it was a little, thank God we were in Chennai. If we had been in Bombay or in Gurgaon, we would have had probably a bigger cultural challenge. But it was in Chennai still, so people are still a little more subdued, and because we had taken most of them from the Mofsil areas, it was a little more subdued. That, from a proper city convent school or a PSBB Vidya Mandir type of person. But today, I can tell you, having also dealt with a whole lot of entrepreneurs that I deal with, most of whom are sub 30 or 32, either you provide value very quickly or they want you out of the way. It's a very simple thing. And very quickly you must demonstrate that you can command respect, you can't demand respect. I think those old things of loyalty, obedience that we were all schooled on, you got to be loyal, you got to be obedient. That thing has shifted dramatically, I believe, in the last 20 years. And many of us still pine for those days, still believe that, those connections, those networks, those relationships, etc. mattered more than the context. But I don't believe so. I think the context has substantially changed. Just for anybody to take a guess, who would have thought the rupee would fluctuate so violently in a matter of 1 month or so? Even experts cannot say what's going to happen. Who would have thought that even the price of gold would fluctuate so violently? that even jewelers do not know what the hell to do, which scheme to offer. You know, so it's very peculiar today because the context has changed, but we haven't changed. That's what I think has happened in the last 20 years. I think is a dramatic changes. We have still not come to terms with it. I've seen in my office, in the initial phase in 2003, 2002, 2003, 2004, when the girls first started coming, you know, into the workforce from mofussil areas, I've had uncles and fathers and brothers coming from Uru in assault vandi. You know that all they call those, the sumos and scorpios are called assault vandi in the south of Tamil Nadu. Because all Arwal and Beach Arwal and all I think are kept in that. They came literally dragged the girl through the access card, you know, on the reception and take her because they think she's carrying on with some boy from another community, caste, whatever. So, but in the last 8-9 years, I've seen a lot of that has just quietened down. A lot of that has just quietened down. There's some level of acceptance that all this is inevitable. So it's a very disconcerting in one way because a lot of guys who come still from engineering colleges like St. Peter's, JPR Engineering, many of those places are still finding it difficult because the boys and girls don't speak with each other. They're not allowed to. Even in the buses that they go, there is a chain kept. This is the boy side, this is the girl side. They suddenly catapulted into a company like ours or a bigger company like TCS or HCL or what have you, where they suddenly boys and girls, and the team leader can be a girl today, can be a boy tomorrow, and a boy doesn't know that he should deal with a girl as his boss. He's not able to many times take it. We've had all these kind of challenges. We've had casteist issues also in some times. Okay, the next one. I'm quickly going to move. Earlier, if you take healthcare as an example, we had very simple paradigm, I mean very simple situation. There were broadly 3 roles. There was a doctor, there was a nurse, and there was a compounder. Broadly, you know, we were very happy. We didn't have to deal with too many guys. We had very simple way of life. Today, if you look at it, you know, just move to the next slide. This business alone is going to be roughly in a couple of years' time about 100 billion. A billion today is roughly 6,500 crores. So you can imagine how big it is. But just to make us feel a little ashamed of how small we are, the US healthcare business is 2.2 or 2.4 trillion. So, which is bigger than the Indian economy, more than double roughly of the Indian economy. So, let's not think we have a very big industry out here, but it's huge. It's still huge by Indian standards. Whole number of things happening out here. But just look at the kind of opportunities and the kind of professions that this business today has got. The next slide, please. If you take any area of healthcare, there's so many things you can do, whether it's as a service provider. My good friend Raju Venkatraman is trying to consolidate diagnostic centers. That's become a big business. You have Elrich, you know, our Rotarian alone, you know, who's pretty big in diagnostics. You have so many other people who are getting to imaging diagnostics. Your Bharat scans of the world have all become very big, much bigger than we can even think of, because an average small equipment is a couple of crores in many of these places. If you take pharmacies, who knew there will be chains of pharmacies? Apart from Apollo, you have Muthu Pharmacy, MediPlus, and this thing and that thing. There's complete chains, and they've become a very big business. They're getting funded as well. If you take doctors, I don't know today which doctor to go to, frankly. Earlier it was very simple in life. You went to a hotel and you asked for coffee, you got one coffee. Today you go and ask for coffee in a coffee day or in a barista. By the time the fellow finishes asking the questions, you decide you don't want the coffee, you know. Because you don't know what you're drinking at the end of the day. The same thing is happening with doctors. There is the concept of a GP, I think, is dead. You don't know who to go to. There's a whole bunch of fellows out there. You take the technicians, whole bunch of things. You take things like clinical research. There are a bunch of companies doing huge amount of work in that area. I can go on, but the key point I'm trying to say is one simple business like healthcare, which we have seen was simply 3 or 4 people, has suddenly now become a very complex game. And that complexity has increased in every business. Okay, next. At the same time, this also is happening. This is a recent news item in July 2013. A compounder in Jaipur had property worth 200 crores and he had a hospital himself worth 22 crores. So just to tell you that health can lead to wealth. That's the The next one. Now coming to changing Chennai, a lot of people, even that day when I was talking, don't realize that Chennai, unlike Bangalore, is not dependent on one or two businesses. Bangalore is very IT centric, to some extent pharma centric, little bit of pharma, but it's largely IT driven. Secondly, unlike Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, in my view, has at least 15 to 18 towns and cities which are independent, economically viable entities. Okay, a huge number of them. You take Shivakasi, the cluster out there. You take the Vaniambadi, Ambur, Ranipet, leather cluster. Like that, I can name about 8-10 big clusters of different things. So it's very fascinating that Tamil Nadu has some advantages that way. It's far more geographically widespread, dispersed, and also industry-wise dispersed. If you take it, we are there in automotive, software, hardware, electronic hardware, healthcare, financial services, and we mustn't forget education and entertainment as well. Now many people don't know, very strangely, that in tourism, that Chennai is number one. Chennai actually is number one. Even I was shocked because I really didn't know this. And in the world, it's the top ranked city. It's number 41 among Indian cities. It's 41. I'm not kidding you. If for foreign tourists, it is the fourth. It's the number one city for foreign tourists. Now, what's the reason I went and probed? Yes, one is it's a gateway to this part of the world, but it has 40 to 45% of all medical tourists come to Chennai. Okay, I'm told that Maldives every day sends 150. Okay, medical patients, and the Coromandel Express is called Ambulance Express in Bengal. Because of the fact that it brings so many patients from there. Now it's very fascinating that there are things which have happened in the last 15-20 years, and we don't know that bunch of things. If you go to Greaves Road and around, it's become a mini Bengal. If you go there, you can get Radha Pallavi, which is the luchi, your little puri made of maida, and aloo masala. It is exactly the kind of Bengali style. You will get it there.
Also signboards are in Bengali.
All the signboards are in Bengali. So actually we haven't realized a whole bunch of things have changed under our noses. Maybe we haven't opened our eyes. Maybe that's perhaps one of the things. But look at the numbers, okay? We are number 2 in software exports. A lot of people don't believe it. But actually I think if you add TCS, which though has the biggest base in Chennai, is headquartered in Bombay. So exports, I think a lot of it is taken from Bombay. We are actually pretty good. We are number 2 after Bangalore, which is pretty huge. You take electronics hardware, we are actually number 1, 45% of the total, thanks to people like Nokia, which sadly has become Micro Nokia now, which has had its largest factory in Chennai. And if you take in education, we are number 1 in primary and upper primary education. So if you look at it, and I don't know if you know that Stalin's sister had the number 1 priced Montessori school in Chennai, Primrose in Velachery. So you can see that even politicians who are canny have understood that there is a lot of money in education. So what I'm trying to say is there have been opportunities, there have been a lot of changes. We may not have seen a lot of it because we've been stuck in one kind of group. But I can tell you there are a lot of things. Now this is something very funny. This is what they say, 100,000 plus people have assets of over 5 crores. I've got all the references. So I was trying to see who are these 100,000. Maybe some of them are here. And it's the 3rd largest market in India for luxury cars. And I always thought the average Chennaiite, didn't want to show off. But a lot of these things, are disproving me. I was actually quite surprised when I looked at some of these things. You can see the numbers here. Okay, the next one. Now, one of the things that I was also happy to see was that Forbes rated Chennai among the fastest growing cities in the world. Okay, and it's the only Indian city to be rated in the 10 fastest growing. We'll have to wait and see whether we can manage what we are doing, but even to be put there is not bad, at a global level. We are also rated among India's few global cities, but our ranking is actually not that great, but it at least gives us an aspiration. We also have a number of Fortune 500 companies, and like I mentioned, there's nothing great about being a $100 billion economy by 2025, because to put it in perspective, like I mentioned earlier, 100 billion is not even what IBM is today. Walmart is 425 billion, one company. So we are not even one company as a city, and not even today, 10 years, 12 years from now. So what I'm trying to say is, if we think we're doing well, we just have to look a little more to see that there's a long way to go. But all it tells you that there is a promise. There's so much more people. We have perhaps have to put the right kind of ideas and see where we can go from here. Okay, coming to the end. But like I mentioned, some things also never change. We have lots of rowdies as well. A lot of them. Luckily, not as bad as perhaps in Western UP or something. But still, maybe we can learn something. There's a lot of things to worry about, and people will be worried that number of minor crimes, criminal activities have been on the rise, because some people are slowly starting to attribute this to social inequality of some sort. You're seeing a lot of petty crimes, murder for gain, all that happening increasingly. Okay, next. Now, quick question to people here. Do you like Chennai? No choice. Now, look at this. Lonely Planet is a world tourist guide. It has made it to the worldwide list of 9 cities you really hate. You can go there and you can give them your comments as well. A lot of people from Chennai have. It says it lacks Bombay's prosperity, Delhi's history, or Bangalore's buzz. Even our movie stars are not that hot. Okay, so while we think we are very great, there are a lot of people, including a lot of people outside of Chennai, in other cities of India. If you ask people who want to get employed, many people are outside. Many of them don't want to come here. So there is something about us which is not something that people outside seem to relish a lot. Maybe cause for introspection. I have some theories, but that's all, perhaps provocative. Next. I think we're done. My view is, at the end of the day, this is the famous Mahabalipuram thingy, that it still rocks. Now, this is my own interpretation of the changing professional profile. I haven't got into the entrepreneurial aspects of it, because that's where I actually have a much closer understanding dealing with so many entrepreneurs. But I'd be happy to entertain any dialogue, not really a question and answer. Thank you, gentlemen and lady.